call the Percy County Board of County Commissioners September 8th, 2020 meeting to order. And I'd like to ask Vice Chairman Powell if he will lead us in invocation.
You desire to pray with me, please. Merciful God and Almighty God, we come before you tonight, acknowledging you as all-powerful, all-knowing, and ask your direction in all that we do here tonight, that it would be in the best interests of the people of our country, our county. And Father, we pray for those that are serving our country in other parts of the world and even in our part itself, to protect our rights to assemble together, to have the freedom to worship you and to conduct business as we're going about here tonight. Freedom is a precious commodity, and we thank you, praise you. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Please rise and I'll ask Commissioner Sims, he will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please salute the flag, will. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Commissioners, you have the agenda in front of you. Do we have any discussion, adjustment? Move for approval. All right, we have a motion for approval. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All right, public hearing. Item number 1, a request by Duke Energy Progress LLC to construct a new 58.5 acre industrial landfill, access road, supporting infrastructure, and leachate pond at the Duke Energy Mayo Steam Electric Plant located at 10660 Boston Road. Do I hear a motion to open the public hearing?
So
moved. All right, it's been properly moved. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Okay. Madam Clerk, I believe you have the names.
Yes, sir. In our first public hearing related to the Duke Energy Mayo Steam Electric Plant, in favor of, we have Ms. Tanya Evans, Mr. Ken Daly, Toby Coleman, Kimberly Witt, Donald Long, and PJ Gentry. If we would ask you to stand in your place as the chairman would like to administer the oath of sworn testimony for this public hearing. And at your place, once he's finished, if you can affirm your oath.
All right. Do you solemnly swear that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, as testimony offered in a public hearing for a special use permit request by Duke Energy Progress LLC to construct a new 58.5 acre industrial landfill, ash basin landfill, access road, supporting infrastructure, and leachate pond at the Duke Energy Mayo Steam Electric Plant located at 10660 Boston Road on land within 224.74 acres described in deed book 134, page 17, tract 21, and 145.94 acres described in deed book 148, page 177, tract 22, located on Boston Road in the Rural Conservation Zoning District. Please say I do. All right, thank you. Madam Clerk, you will have Laura come explain first.
Yes, sir, please.
Chairman, members of the board. Tonight for the first case, petition SUP 01-20, it will be presented to you by Kayla D. Christina on the planning staff.
Yes.
Sorry, I know you guys can hear me better like this. So as Lori said, the first case tonight is SUP 01-20. I want to start off by saying all state statutes and planning ordinance requirements have been met for this public hearing. Petition SUP 01-20 is a request by Duke Energy Progress LLC to construct a new 58.5 acre industrial landfill along with supporting infrastructure and a leachate pond at the Duke Energy Mayo Steam Electric Plant located at 10660 Boston Road on land within 224.74 acres described in deed book 134, page 17, tract 21, and 145.94 acres described in deed book 148, page 177, tract 22, located on Boston Road in the RC Rural Conservation Zoning District. So as I said, the petition is proposing development on 2 tracts within the existing Mayo plant, tracts 21 and 22. The land currently contains portions of the Mayo plant and ash basin and wooded areas. I want to point out that land to the west of the property contains vacant properties and a few businesses. I'll pull up a map in a second to show that. All of the land in the tract is currently zoned RC, and as well as the zoning on the surrounding tracts, that's all RC. So this is an aerial of the property. This is Boston Road here, and these are the tracts that we're looking at, tract 21 and 22. And then up to the northern part of Boston Road are some vacant parcels and then some existing businesses. As I said, the subject property and all of the surrounding land, they're all zoned RC, which is rural conservation. So the Person County Planning and Zoning staff issued a special use permit to Duke Energy in 2010 for an on-site industrial landfill on the land within the Mayo plant, but that's to the west of Boston Road. The existing landfill was approved for 118.4 acres, but only 31 acres have been used. So the applicant is requesting to construct a new landfill and access roads in the center of tract 21 and supporting infrastructure, including erosion and sediment control basins, ditches, leachate collection system, contractor parking, construction staging areas, and portable contractor facilities, and also stormwater management structures on the portion of tract 22 to the east of Boston Road. So that's across the street from the existing landfill. This is the proposed site plan for the location of the landfill. This is Boston Road here. This green area is the landfill, proposed landfill. And down here is the leachate pond. The Person County Future Land Use Plan identifies the proposed site as rural residential. The definition for that is on the screen as well as in your packets. And I want to specifically call out one section of this type of identification. Rural residential, it reads locational criteria for non-residential uses within this land use category would include frontage and access to a major state highway or secondary road, which Boston Road is, and then proximity to similar uses and spatial separation from non-compatible uses. There are also a few goals in the land use plan that are particularly pertinent in this case. Those are on the screen as well as in your packets. Planning staff recommends that if the board approves the request, the following conditions be placed on the approval: that the applicant is to combine tracts 21 and 22 following the issuance of the special use permit. The applicant is to obtain all permits necessary from the Person County Departments of Environmental Health, Planning and Zoning, and Building Inspections. And then the applicant is to obtain all permits necessary and provide copies of those permits to the Planning and Zoning Department for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. At the August 13th Planning Board meeting, the board voted unanimously 7-0 to recommend approval of SUP 0120 with staff's recommended conditions. And the Board of Commissioners shall issue the special use permit if it has evaluated an application and determined the 4 findings of facts that are on the screen. So please refer to those findings of facts when making your decision. Do you guys have any questions for me?
Kayla? Okay, thank you.
right, speaking in favor, as we've already sworn, is Ms. Tanya Evans. She will start us off of 84 Flat River Circle, Timberlake, North Carolina.
Good evening.
Evening.
Thank you for having me. I know most of you know me, but again, I'm Tanya Evans. I am the district manager for Duke in the Government Community Relations Department, but I am also joined here with me by Toby Coleman. Toby is an attorney with our Smith Anderson Law Firm in Raleigh and has expertise in land use and zoning matters. And he's helping us prepare and submit our applications before you for these projects. I also have with me Ken Daly. Ken is a principal engineer for Environment Infrastructure Solutions with Wood PLC. Ken and his team have developed the landfill designs and specifications for these permits, and he will be on hand to answer questions. And I also have my colleague, Kim Witt. She works with me here at Duke Energy, and she is the environmental lead for solid waste permitting and compliance. She's also available to answer any questions that you may have. Toby is going to walk us through the specifics for each of these sites, but before he does, I wanted to provide you a bit of background about these permits. So last year, state regulators, the environmental community, and Duke Energy agreed to a plan to permanently close the company's remaining coal ash basins by excavating the ash into lined landfills in a manner that continues to protect people, communities, and the environment. So this plan recognizes that drinking and recreational water supplies are safe now and ensures that they remain protected. This plan has been approved by NCDEQ. It's in accordance with a consent order from the state, and it follows rules and regulations outlined under state law within the Coal Ash Management Act. And the landfill locations we're bringing for you your consideration tonight were a result of a detailed analysis that we did that includes prioritizing the environmental protection, minimizing disruption to our communities, our ability to comply with state and federal law, our ability to meet regulatory deadlines, minimizing the impacts to natural resources, and minimizing costs for our customers. And it's important to note that as a result of this analysis, we are seeking permits to construct landfills that at both Roxborough and Mayo are on plant property and adjacent to or even within the existing footprint of the current ash basins. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Toby to provide some more specifics about the projects and how they meet the required criteria for the permits. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Commissioner. My name, as Tanya said, is Toby Coleman. I'm an attorney with Smith Anderson Law Firm in Raleigh. I have the pleasure of representing Duke Energy Progress for you here tonight. I'll go ahead and follow everybody's lead just to make sure everybody can hear me in the back as well as y'all. It's nice to see y'all even in this mask circumstance. So I think Tanya sort of summarized, why we're here. This is triggered by a plan to close the existing ash basin. That's going to involve a pretty major undertaking. It's going to involve the excavation and relocation of about 6.6 million tons of coal ash that's currently in the ash basin. And the reason we're here in front of you tonight is that we're moving it to a dry landfill. When you want to build a landfill here in Person County, you got to get a special use permit. That obviously goes through the quasi-judicial process that we're doing here tonight. We have gone through, and we will detail this, we have looked at both options of either sending it to the existing landfill on the western side of the Mayo proper, large Mayo property, or what we are proposing. And for the reasons that Tanya's outlined, and I'll outline in a little bit more detail, what we've determined is that the safest and best option, both for the community and the public, environmentally and otherwise, is an on-site landfill. So Kayla did a very good job of summarizing sort of the location, but to give you sort of a sense on where this is. So this is the existing ash basin. I don't know if you guys have a printout of our PowerPoint, but there's a picture of the ash basin just to give you a sense on what it looks like. That ash basin is right next to the existing power plant. All that entire facility is on the eastern side of Boston Road 15501. Here's the state line. And so the proposal is to close this ash basin. That is required. That's not just a plan by Duke. That's required by state law. The Coal Ash Management Act of 2014 requires it by 2029. It's also required via. It's also part of a consent order with environmental groups. So this has been a process that Duke Energy has been working through with a variety of different interested parties. The closure is required and overseen by the state. The state actually does a closure analysis and reviews it for public to ensure that the closure will protect public safety and health. That's again part of the Coal Ash Management Act. As part of the closure, the ash basin will be drained. The coal ash then that is currently in the wet pond has to then be excavated and placed into a new landfill. That's what we're talking about here. That landfill is going to be subject to oversight and review by DEQ in the design phase, in the process of permitting, as well as in the construction and ultimately management and operation. So there's a mention, Taylor mentioned, there's an existing what I'll call the monofill that was permitted about a decade ago. This was when the Mayo plant was still in operation. It was the plan, because the ash basin was still in operation and the plant was still in operation. The area where we are now proposing landfill was not really an option. So in 2010, when Duke came to you and said, we want to build this 100 plus acre landfill, the reason that they chose this site, and this site was ultimately permitted, was because they needed a place to send coal ash from existing operations. They couldn't send it here. The ash basin was full. The goal was to get it to a dry basin, and this, creating a landfill in the existing ash basin was not an option at that time. What has changed? Well, what's changed is that the operations, burning coal, creating coal ash, is going to stop. As part of this process, coal ash is not going to be created at the Mayo plant any longer. As a result, and as a result of the closure here, that means that this area became a viable option. And in doing the analysis, Duke found a number of things that made this a more viable option than, so this approximately 60-acre area, a more viable option than expanding and creating and using up the remaining 80 acres on this landfill. First of all, it reduced the amount of large trucks carrying coal ash that needed to cross Boston Road, either by the construction of a new bridge or just driving across the road multiple times a day carrying tons and tons of coal ash. There's also an environmental benefit. This area over here, and both areas have some impact on streams. There's less impact in this proposed area up here. So the area we are proposing has less linear impact on streams. In addition, it would drain into any, it's going to be constructed and under state regulations that ensure safety. But in the event that something happened, the surface impacts would go into the ash basin area, which will be reclaimed, as opposed to going into surface streams over here. So I want to quickly address the special use criteria that's before you. Those criteria, as you know, are the proposed use will not materially endanger public health or safety. The proposed use meets required conditions and specifications set out in the county ordinance. The proposed use will not substantially injure adjoining property or the public necessity, and the proposed use is in harmony with the area. I'm not going to spend much time on number 2 and number 4 because number 1, I think staff's report has established that this proposed use meets the required conditions and specifications set out in the ordinance. We've more than exceeded the required setbacks. It is a use that's permitted by special use criteria, and it's also in harmony with the area. It's on a power plant, on power plant land. In terms of public health and safety, this proposed use is actually required by, or this proposed landfill, the closure of the coal ash pond, is required by state law with the stated purpose of improving public health and safety. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on that. So that also goes to the public necessity of it. And because it's on Duke land, it is not going to harm adjoining property. So as Tanya noted, this is part of the closure is part of a long-standing discussion between state regulators, environmental groups, and Duke about what to do about these coal ash ponds. And they all agree that environmental groups, regulators, Duke, all agree that an on-site landfill will protect people and the environment. The best way to think about this is almost as an engineered, what I'm told by the engineers is, it's an engineered containment system. There's a double liner system with leak detection, cover system, there's a groundwater monitoring network. In the packet, there's sort of I think a useful cross section. The landfill will not just be constructed and closely monitored during construction, it will also be the landfill and groundwater will be closely monitored for decades. Here's the property line setback. Again, it's in excess of the 150-foot requirement. It helps protect adjoining properties. And with that, if you have any questions, happy to answer them. Our team is also happy to answer any questions you may have.
It's in the Mayo community with the water treatment systems on like they have out in Hyco.
The water treatment systems were installed on any home that requested it that was within half mile radius of the ash basin. So I don't know the exact number unless Tim knows, but if there are and they required it, then they were installed.
So we don't know how many, but there are some.
I can find out how many there are. I just don't know I don't want to be wrong about the number.
Other questions related to the engineering?
So does any commissioners have any questions for the Duke team?
Is this considered a subtitle D landfill?
Yes, it actually exceeds the subtitle D requirements in that it has a double liner system, which includes 2 geomembranes with a leak detection system in between it. So it's going above and beyond ordinary municipal solid waste landfill regulated under subtitle D.
So we're permitting, this is a question for our planning and zoning. We're permitting an industrial landfill. Even though in parentheses it says ash basin landfill, what are other permitted items that can go in an industrial landfill?
Hi, I'm Kimberly Witt. I work with Duke Energy. Ash Basin Landfill is just the name of the landfill. So that's, but it's an industrial landfill permitted under the industrial landfill rules of the state and the CCR rule with the EPA.
I understand that. My question is, what are other permitted items other than coal ash that can go into an industrial landfill?
I guess I don't understand the
So you can put coal ash in an industrial landfill. What else can you put in there?
Say that again, is coal ash?
You can put coal ash in an industrial landfill. What other items are permitted? What else could you dump in there?
Oh, sure. It'll be permitted for the same general waste that's permitted in the current monofill across the road, which is essentially just waste produced during the power production process. So it could be FGD, it could be soil commingled with ash, it could be sludge from the wastewater treatment system. But it's the same list, and that list of waste materials is defined in the permit application.
I have a much shorter answer for our zoning ordinance, anything non-hazardous and non-toxic. So anything that meets those two could be put in this landfill.
Questions from the board for Duke team members?
One for Mr. Coleman. Would you classify monitoring for decades? What is that? Is that 1 decade, 2 decades, 10 decades?
I'll let the experts.
Okay, so are you talking about groundwater monitoring? When you
Yes.
say monitoring?
Yes.
Yeah, so the state and the federal have rules that once you close a landfill facility, you go into post-closure monitoring for at least 30 years. And then after 30 years, depending on what's being seen, if anything in the groundwater, you basically meet with the state and decide if you have to continue monitoring or if you're able to cease monitoring.
Okay.
Commissioner Powell, just to add to that, as I mentioned, the deadline for closure of this landfill would be 2029. So from today, you're talking about a approximately 10-year, estimated 10-year, up to 10-year process for actually constructing, filling, and closing a landfill. And then after the closure, another 30 years monitoring.
Thank you.
The current monofill, it is not at capacity?
No, only one phase has been built. That's 31. That's the 31-acre phase. It is not yet at capacity.
So, not to get ahead of myself with the HYCO one, but what was the frame of thought of not just using the current monofill and one at the Mayo plant where there's far less homes, I think, probably, at least from the Boston Road area, where this one's gonna be permitted, and just using one in the county instead of trying to permit another in the HYCO area, other than cost and trucking it?
Yeah, I can give you the general answer, and if you have additional questions, we're happy to give you more detail. The general answer is frankly that we're talking about millions and millions of tons of coal ash. And so the goal is to transport it as short a distance as possible, both for issues of traffic and environmental safety, but also you don't want coal ash dust spraying on homes, on roads, on cars. And so rather than attempting to haul coal ash from one power plant to another, the idea was let's use the existing facilities. We have to drain these ponds anyway as part of the drain of the ponds cleanup. Let's put this coal ash in a monofill on both of these sites. Or excuse me, on a fill on both of these sites.
Further questions from the board? Okay, Madam Clerk.
All right, Mr. Donald Long.
Chairman, members of the board, I'm Donald Long. I'm a lifelong native of Person County. I've either had education or hold certifications in stormwater, wastewater. I have a wastewater 1 certification, a subsurface wastewater certification, a physical chemical wastewater certification. land application of residual certification. Duke Energy, which was formerly CP&L, they requested a permit and were given a permit when these facilities were built. And they built it based on the permit that the state of North Carolina gave them, which was based on the best science at that time. Of course, now the science has changed. And Duke has been a good corporate citizen of Person County and for the state of North Carolina, and they're vital to Person County. The Division of Environmental Quality has done an exhaustive study, and they have directed Duke on the expansion of this landfill. I went to the 2 hearings that Division of Environmental Quality had here back earlier this year. Now, I believe it was brought up, there were millions of tons of ash at the Hyco plant. I think that's one reason you probably can't move it from one location to another across the county. But I would just simply like to request that the permit, as requested by Duke Energy, be approved.
Thank you.
PJ Gentry.
Commissioners and staff, thank you as always for being here, working for the county. Do appreciate it. I don't have the credentials that Donald Long has, but I do support him in his statements. Duke Power has been an excellent corporate partner in this county, and they've done everything that's been requested of them, trying to minimize the disruption of coal ash, doing it responsibly, according to what the directives that they've been given. And I really support that they're doing the right thing, and I ask that you support them in their endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes our in favor. I would ask that Mr. Howard Eastwood come forward.
Just kind of find some cautions, since this is a quasi-judicial procedure, I would just move that the staff report and all other documents that have been provided to the board related to this be entered into the record as evidence.
Mr. Howard Eastwood, if you would please state your full address, and because we admitted you from the oath of sworn testimony, I would ask Chairman Jeffers to read that oath for Mr. Eastwood specifically.
Ms. Eastwood, do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth as testimony offered in a public hearing for a special use permit request by Duke Energy Progress LLC to construct a new 58.5 acre industrial landfill, access roads, supporting infrastructure, leachate pond at the Duke Energy Mayo Steam Electric Plant located at 10660 Boston Road on land within 224 acres, 0.74 acres, described in deed book 134, page 17, tract 21, and 145.94 acres, described in deed book 148, page 177, tract 22, located on Boston Road in the Rural Conservation Zoning District.
Yes, I do.
And if you'll state your address, please.
309 Eastwood Long Lane, Roxborough, North Carolina.
All right, you may proceed.
Well, I reckon I'm not one of the friends of Duke because they hadn't really treated us too decent on that end. Our properties, it's gonna be 300 to 500 foot away, and there's several wells down there with systems. I got one, my neighbor got one. People across in Virginia that don't even get a letter saying what's happening, they got them. But, nobody lets them know because they in Virginia, and there's several houses right on the other side of the dirt road. And the biggest thing, we've been fighting this for last few years, the environmental groups, the group out of Virginia and everywhere. The only reason they doing this now is they sued them to get it up. They just wanted to put dirt over top of it, leave it lie. That's all they put, cover over it, dirt. So I've been to sell things and depositions, to make them get that coal ash up. Like you said, they begged us 10 years ago, please let us have that landfill across the road. They got hundreds of acres over there. It's a whole lot farther away. And 501, if you see that 300-foot barrier, the new 501's got to go through that crap. 300 acres when they come, 300 foot when they come through there, you're going to be looking at the landfill. We're going to have to listen to all of this traffic, all this beeping noise, all that flying ash for 10 more years. That's sort of a slap in the face. And that half a mile radius, I've got 6 tracts of land, 3 rental houses down there. And 2 of my houses was 130 foot from the half a mile radius. They wouldn't even talk to me about putting in a system to try to help us out on them houses. So, everybody said, Duke's your friend, but the only reason I've heard is they don't want to be the safety of the road. But last year they turned over Mayhew Lake Road to the construction area. There was hundreds of trucks all day long. I mean, just dusting 501, dusting my property. I had no problem with that. They was going up and down 501. Now they just got to go one straight stretch. We got a wood yard right up the road, hundreds of trucks a day. Don't have no problem pulling in, pulling out on 501. So I would like, to carry it across the road. They ain't used for a section of it anyway. They got to get the same permits to add on and do on that side as they do this. Nobody said how deep this is going to be. If they go down enough to put 6 million cubic yards of ash, and all wells go dry, is anybody going to be responsible? We ain't got no water. Nobody said how deep. It's got to go on 58 acres to put 6.5 million tons of ash in. To me, I think we should work out a better system than putting it right down in the corner of land. They got so many hundreds of acres, but they want to put it right up on the corner with everybody else, close around. Appreciate it, y'all, but if I can point, I don't know if you can bring that map back up, I'll show you what I'm talking about. Well, our property is.
Should just be able to. Set the map from this photo or set the map from planning. On this one. Okay. You should be able to get
That's ours, and like I said, several houses. You see 501 is right there, 300 foot extra. When the new 501 is built, I might not live to see it, but it takes a 300 foot right of way. If they have to move anything, the state, we're gonna be liable to pay for changing any of that. That's the road I was talking about comes straight out. I ain't never been able to see how the state could turn over that Mayhew Lake Road to contractors. I called Ms. Evans, say, hey, is anybody gonna stop, pay for washing our houses and stuff when that dust come across 501? That was dangerous, I had to threaten 2 or 3 times, to go up before they finally started watering the road. The only deal seemed like they worried about is crossing the road. They just keep dragging it on. We ain't got time but that 10 years, it's a whole lot of noise for us to do, a whole lot of stuff to do. Like I said, that's right on the corner of the property lines of state West Virginia and here. You see the coal road right at the bottom of the screen. It's like 800 acres over there, what they already got a landfill and a road going through it. So I don't think just the dangers of crossing the road over a 10-year period, companies work at night too when it ain't much traffic on the road. I think in 10 years, you can be safely crossing 501. Use the landfill or new park that wants to come. You don't think they're gonna look at all of it? Well, how many landfills, coal ash landfills, is Person County gonna have, How many chances of leaks or whatever in the future? Just put one in the way you want one, We change it from this deal, let's build another over here. Has anybody said, like you were saying a while ago, if Duke leaves in 9 years, they still got them landfills, they're gonna bring stuff from other places that they wanna dump, since they got a designated dump. Has anybody got anybody's word when it ends, it closes up, nothing in the future comes from other counties, other parts of the state. You leave them an open door, And nobody said, well, hey, we're gonna close this one. And as soon as we do this, to me, need to ask a whole lot more questions. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you.
That concludes the speakers.
Okay. Does any commissioners have any questions or for anyone that spoke? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to come out of public hearing? It's been properly moved. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. All opposed, motion carries. Okay, consideration to grant or deny the request.
Motion to approve the special use permit.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Further discussion? My only concern is we've got too many landfills in Person County as is. We've got one in the southern part of the county. I'm concerned that we're permitting an industrial landfill, that there are other uses that can be, or other items that can be permitted to be dumped into this landfill. 10 years ago, I was on the board when we approved the monofill. It's not at capacity. They're just in phase one. And I'm not in favor. Those are my comments. Does any other commissioner have any other comments? Further discussion?
Chair, I'd just like to say, with the comments that Duke has made, with all the environmental issues that I feel like they have covered. I think as you said, if it was a concern, my concern obviously is the water and the wells around the facility and the ash basin. I think Duke has said that they will be monitoring those wells. And I think they're putting a good faith forward in that. Also, I think there's been some water treatment that's been put at some of these homes that are nearby. But it is a concern, obviously, is that you want to make sure they're not going to harm the water with chemicals or anything like that from the ash basin.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye. All opposed? No. Motion carries. Item number 3.
For the record, that was a 4-1 vote.
4-1,
Okay,
me
thank you.
abstaining. Item number 3, a request by Duke Energy Progress LLC to expand the existing industrial landfill by 80 acres at the Duke Energy Roxboro Steam Electric Plant located at 1700 Dunaway Road on land within 231.13 acres described in deed book 98, page 90, tract 31. 244.74 acres described in deed book 98, page 39, tract 22. 187.88 acres described in deed book 98, page 605, tract 38. And 28.25 acres described in deed book 98, page 279, tract 91 in a residential zoning district. Do I hear a motion to open the public hearing? It's been properly moved. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. All opposed, motion carries. Lori, you have the names?
Yes, sir. For this second public hearing for Duke Energy Roxboro Steam Electric Plant, all members who have signed up are speaking in favor of. We have Ms. Tanya Evans, Mr. Ken Daly, Mr. Toby Coleman, Ms. Kimberly Witt, Mr. Donald Long, and Ms. PJ Gentry. If you will stand at your seat and the Chairman Jefferson will read the oath of sworn testimony, and you can affirm at the end, please.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth as testimony offered in a public hearing for a special use permit request by Duke Energy Progress LLC to expand the existing industrial landfill by 80 acres at the Duke Energy Roxboro Steam Electric Plant located at 1700 Dunaway Road on land within 231.13 acres described in deed book 98, page 90, tract 31, 244.74 acres described in deed book 98, page 39, tract 32, 187.88 acres described in deed book 98, page 605, tract 38, and 28.25 acres described in deed book 98, page 279, tract 91 in a residential zoning district. Please say I do. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, for case SUP 02-20, it will be presented to you by Kayla DeChristina, our staff planner as well.
All right, so our second case tonight is SUP 0220. I want to start out by saying all state statutes and planning ordinance requirements have been met for this public hearing. Petition SUP 0220 is a request by Duke Energy Progress LLC to expand the existing industrial landfill at the Duke Energy Roxborough Steam Electric Plant on Dunaway Road. The petition proposes development on 4 tracks within the Roxborough plant, tracks 31, 32, 38, and 91. The tracks are located off of Dunaway Road within the Roxborough plant, and the tracks currently contain portions of the power plant in Ash Basin and Woodlands. Properties to the east of the site contain vacant land and scattered single-family residences that are over 1,000 feet away. Just to quickly talk about the zoning, and I'll show maps of these after this slide. The tracks to the north of Dunaway Road are zoned R residential, which include track 31, 32, part of 38, and 91. Tracks to the south of Dunaway Road are zoned GI, general industrial, and that includes part of track 38. And then the area east of the site is all zoned RC, which is rural conservation. So this is an aerial of the current site. This is where the existing landfill is. This is McGee's Mill Road, and this is Dunaway Road coming into the plant. And then there are some residents down here off of Dunaway Road. This is a zoning map that shows the proposed site. Up here is the R residential zoning district. Down here is the general industrial. And over here on McGee's Mill Road is the RC zoning district. The plant was created prior to the enactment of the planning ordinance. The existing landfill is approximately 90 acres. And the applicant is requesting to expand the existing landfill by 80 acres. This expansion will encompass 25 acres of the existing landfill, which will only result in a net increase of 55 acres of landfill area. The applicant is also requesting to construct 2 stormwater basins and a surrounding gravel road on the same tracks. This is a site plan of the proposed landfill. This green area is the proposed landfill. Dunaway Road is right here, coming in. These are the 2 stormwater basins, and then the gravel road that surrounds the new portion of the landfill is down here. The Person County Land Use Plan identifies the proposed site as rural residential / agricultural. The definition for that type of identification is on the screen. I want to call out one specific part of that definition. The locational criteria for non-residential uses within this land use category would include frontage and access to a major state highway or secondary road, proximity to similar uses, and spatial separation from non-compatible uses. There are also 2 goals in the land use plan that are relevant in this discussion. Those are on the screen as well as in your packets. Planning staff recommends that if the board approves the request, the following conditions be placed on the special use permit. The applicant is to combine tracks 31, 32, 38, and 91 following issuance of the special use permit. The applicant is to obtain all permits necessary from the following Person County departments: environmental health, planning and zoning, and building inspections. And the applicant is to obtain all permits necessary and provide copies to the Planning and Zoning Department for the following agencies: the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the NC Department of Environmental Quality. At the August 13th Planning Board meeting, the board voted unanimously 7-0 to recommend approval of SUP 0220 with staff's recommended conditions. The Board of Commissioners shall issue the special use permit if it is evaluated in application and determined the 4 findings of fact that are on the screen. So please use those when making your decision. Does anyone have any questions for staff? Yes. Do those tracks occupy homes? Are there homes on the track? Yes. Yes, down here, this one does. These are here. The required buffer is 150 feet from the landfill. Those are over 1,000 feet away. So the landfill would be up here, right where that is. That's over 1,000 feet away from those homes. So it more than exceeds that requirement. Because, let's see. Oh, I'm sorry, the landfill's down here. The new landfill will be down here because it includes part of track 38. The landfill, the proposed landfill, and some of the accessory structures, like the stormwater basins and the gravel road, go on to track 38. No, it's track 38 goes across Dunaway Road right here. This little piece, and that's where those accessory structures go into. This new proposal is all above Dunaway Road. Yes. Thank you.
Thanks again. Appreciate your time and consideration for this particular permit as well. My comments are reflective of what I had already said, so I'm going to go ahead and just turn it back over to Toby if that's okay with you guys. Thanks.
Hello again, Commissioners. Toby Coleman, 150 Fayetteville Street in Raleigh for the applicant Duke Energy Progress. I guess, okay. I'm going to do what I should have done at the start last time, which is I will go ahead and move that the staff report and all the documents, maps, and other things in the packet be entered into evidence in this case because it is a quasi-judicial hearing. So this is a very similar case. I want to be sensitive to your time. So because it's its own separate hearing, I'm going to touch on the major issues, but I also I'm going to try to avoid repeating myself as much as possible. So very similar situation in Mayo. Coal, it's a coal plant, has a coal ash pond, needs to close under state law and otherwise. This would involve a larger amount, about 16.9 million tons of coal ash from the closure and relocation of 2 ash basins there on the facility. Again, the goal here is to move the coal ash as in as short distance as possible. There's an existing landfill on site, so the goal here is to expand the existing landfill. This is probably in your packet, but this is a map to the extent it's useful. There is there's 2 ash basins, what is known as the West Ash Basin and the East Ash Basin. Both of them are south of the Roxborough plant, the HYCO plant, which is sort of at the top of the picture here. The proposed expansion is going to be next of the East Ash Basin landfill, which is right next to the ash basin. Both of these ash basins will be closed pursuant to state law and otherwise. As I mentioned, this closure will be required and overseen by the state. I will note that as part of under the Coal Ash Management Act of 2014, not only is the closure required and overseen by the state, but again, there are specific requirements that are to be met regarding the design of the new facility. And among other things, You have to provide geographic studies, you have to provide groundwater studies, and the state will take a look at that, and the state determines, does this meet and protect public safety? And so a lot of that is going to be done by the state. So just want, to the extent that there are any questions regarding that, those issues are going to be addressed by the DEQ and have been sort of ongoing as part of that process. Here is hopefully maybe a little bit more of an illuminating picture to the question that you had, Commissioner Jeffers. This is in green is the proposed landfill. You were asking about, I believe, the two parcels down here. This is track 38. As you can see, it just barely, the proposed landfill facility barely touches that portion of track 38. Obviously, the goal here is not to use all of track 38, and that is not part of the request. Rather, the special use permit will be associated with the site plan. The site plan will provide the boundaries of the facility and the attached facility. So that will provide some of the limitations I think that you're concerned about. And certainly feel free to speak up if you have specific concerns that I've not addressed. Just to go through some of the criteria again, I believe that this has been established that it's already met the required conditions and specifications of the county ordinance as set out in the county report. It's also next to an existing landfill on power plant property, so it is in harmony with the area, and it is zoned for this use as a special use permit. As outlined, both under state law, which will require that the landfill be designed for public safety. This is the same slide you saw for Mayo. There's an engineered containment system that is going to be part of this process. This is a sort of simplified version for somebody like me that I can understand, but it's got a double line system with groundwater monitoring, and as outlined in the prior hearing, it will be closely monitored. It will be monitored, groundwater monitored for decades, 30 years as required by law after closure. This goes to the question, I believe, and sort of impact on adjoining properties. The closest neighboring property, by our calculation, this is the most conservative calculation, is approximately 1,300 feet from the landfill expansion boundary. It's, I believe, 1,600 feet is closer to where the actual landfill may be, but that's sort of the most conservative number. That is about 10 times more than is 9 times more than is required as far as buffer goes under county requirements. And it, again, is adjoining an existing landfill. The goal here, in part, again, as I noted in the last hearing, is to avoid having coal ash. By doing this, the large trucks that have coal ash will be able to sort of move between the existing facilities on existing coal ash basins on the facility, rather than hauling coal ash out a residential road, which is the primary access to this property. That me and the full B team are available for questions we may have.
Questions from the board for the Duke team?
I got one question. Does the coal ash that you've got out there right now, is it in a pond that's flooded? Does it have water standing with it?
I believe that there are two wet ponds. Yes.
So you'll be moving it from a wet storage to a dry storage with a drainage and a protection over it that it should cut down on the leachate from what possibly you could have at this time.
That is correct. That is part of actually why state law requires the closure of the existing coal ash ponds. Is for that exact purpose.
See, that's how some of those wells got contaminated before, was leachate from that ash pond. And I've been around probably longer than some people would like for me to be around as an employee and a commissioner here, but I remember when coal ash got back into your lake out there and caused a selenium problem probably in the late 70s or early 80s. And took quite a while to get that straightened out. So you can get things out of coal ash. And I understand Mr. Jeffers' concern about being within a certain distance of these houses and residents out there, but it appears to me that, I know you're fixing to spend a whole lot of money, but it appears to me that what you're fixing to do with it, better than what you're doing with it, what you did with it in the past and what's being done with it right today. So it looks like that this should be an improvement. Not, like I said, dealing with different types of landfills. Now, this is completely different from, in my opinion, from a landfill that, like we've got down there where you take garbage and everything in, because I don't know what's in that. It may be a little coal ash mixed with something else in that. I don't know what's that. But with this one, it will be one product, and I'm assuming you're not fixing to put something else in this landfill, even though it could be permitted for it. Number one.
That's correct. I mean, the intent.
And number
is-
two, it's on your property, entirely owned by Duke. And number three is it looks like it should be an improvement over what's out there now. If it's anything, it should improve the environment instead of degrade it. And I understand the gentleman's question about a while ago about dust and different things, but you all are citing these close enough by to try to cut down on a lot of transportation, and which makes sense. I mean, I understand why you don't want to haul that many million tons no farther than you got to. But so it looks like this should be an improvement, but I want to point out that it's lined at the bottom and it's also lined at the top. If you look at the diagram on here, and if it's built according to specifications, it should be an improvement to the groundwater and to the area as well.
Yes, we would wholeheartedly agree with that.
That's all I got, Mr. Jeffers. I just want to point that out.
I will clarify what
I've
Mr.
been around a while, and usually I oppose landfills from the neighborhood. Usually gets in a big uproar over them, but in this situation, it looks like to me this is going to be an improvement over what we've got now.
being a permitted industrial landfill. Mr. Cobb, I believe you were getting ready to say your intent is to only have coal ash there, but we do know that it's permitted for other uses.
Well, that's correct. I mean, there's-
Non-hazardous, non-toxic, doesn't just say coal ash.
That is correct. That's my understanding as well.
Commissioner Sims, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was going to ask again, just going over the water. The water treatment, if I'm not mistaken, Tanya, you said that if they asked for it, Duke provided that, is that correct? So my question is, and it obviously wasn't everyone within that radius, is that right?
So there is a half-mile radius, and by law, we were required to provide water treatment systems to any resident who requested them within that half-mile radius. If I had known about the question, I would have been able to provide you the numbers of residents who we provided those to, and I'm sorry I don't have that with me right now, but I can certainly follow up with it.
I'm going to follow up to the question. My question is, I was just wondering is now that we're expanding and someone comes to you now and says they would like to have the water treatment system put in or what have you, would Duke still do that?
So this landfill is still within that half-mile boundary. So that does not extend the boundary from what we had originally used to determine who was eligible for water treatment systems.
Okay. But if they came now, I'm just saying, we know who was eligible. They didn't ask earlier, but they asked now, would they be able to?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Concern I've had from the residents out in that area was just like what Ms. Elliott said, from the Mayo area, is that you did a half-a-mile radius, where you're half a mile, well, I'm your neighbor, but I'm outside half a mile. So how can you get a water treatment, but I'm supposed to trust my water? And that's just a concern we have that I hear from the community.
If I may, I hear you. And at some point you have to, the line has to
Couldn't do
stop.
everybody.
But I will assure those who are concerned that based on our groundwater our studies, that the water is flowing away from the ponds anyway. So the data does not support that our ash basins are affecting wells with our neighbors, but we did provide those water treatment systems nonetheless.
Further questions for the Duke team? Okay, Madam Clerk.
All right, were there any further comments from Mr. Ken Daly or Kimberly Witt to the board? Okay, no questions. We'll go on to Mr. Donald Long, please.
Just say ditto and we can move it along. I'm just playing.
You're right, ditto. Ditto, exactly, and Chairman, Commissioner Clayton, I agree with you. The science has improved, and it's a great improvement over what we have now. And I'd like to urge you to approve. Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
PJ Gentry, please.
Thank you, Ms. Gentry.
Hey, they agree with me.
It's 2020.
Okay. Anyone in opposition?
No, sir.
Okay, I did want the board members to note that there is a letter of opposition at your desk from a resident out in the McGee's Mill Road area, Mr. Philip Benji. So I want you to make note of that. Okay, further questions for anyone that was sworn? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to come out of the public hearing?
So moved.
All right, it's been properly moved. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. All right, motion carries. Okay, consideration to grant or deny.
Motion to approve special use permit with the conditions as cited from the planning board.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Further discussion? My comments will be ditto with the adding that at the Mayo plant, at least we've got a water line going out Boston Road. There is no water line anywhere near the Mayo community and those folks out on McGee's Mill in the Sepho area. And that's always been a concern of mine, as well as the fact that the Mayo one that you all just approved was in a rural conservation district. Now we're approving a landfill in a residential zoned area. And I'm in opposition to that. Further discussion from the board? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. All opposed? Nay. Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to add a comment. My first motion for the first public hearing, I failed to mention that the to approve with the conditions of the planning department
Thank you.
recommendations. So I want to clarify that.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Freer. Okay, item number 5, petition TA 320, a request by the Person County Planning Department staff on behalf of the Person County Board of Commissioners to repeal the existing solar energy system regulations in the Person County Planning Ordinance Note number 2, Industrial and Manufacturing Operations, and Note 10, Solar Energy Systems, and enact a freestanding solar energy system ordinance. Do I hear a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
It's been properly moved. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. All right, Madam Clerk.
Well,
Well,
would you
Laura,
like-
you want to make the intro first?
Yes, sir, please.
Chairman, members of the board, the last planning item on the agenda tonight, petition TA-0320 for a freestanding solar ordinance will be presented to you by Caleb and Christina as well.
Thank you.
So last item, last petition is TA 0320. I want to start off by saying all state statutes and planning ordinance requirements have been met for this public hearing. Petition TA 0320 is a request by the Person County Planning Department on behalf of the Person County Board of Commissioners to repeal the existing solar energy system regulations in the Person County Planning Ordinance Note 2, Industrial and Manufacturing Operations, and Note 10, Solar Energy Systems, and enact a freestanding solar energy system ordinance to address community concerns and better regulate solar energy systems. So this is an overview of the sections in the new ordinance. I plan to give a comparison between the old and new proposed rules at the end of this presentation. But just for now, this is the information that's contained in the proposed freestanding ordinance. So just to give a quick summary of the proposed freestanding ordinance, the proposed freestanding ordinance regulates solar energy systems by the type of system, whether it's ground or roof mounted, the acreage of panels proposed, and the zoning district that the property is located in. Depending on those factors, solar energy systems are approved at either staff level or they require a special use permit. So I'm going to quickly go through the requested planning ordinance changes from staff. Most of this is just to ensure that solar energy systems are governed only by the freestanding ordinance and not double regulated. So in note 2, we're just asking that the red text be removed. And that's also in your packets. Note 10, we're asking that essentially the whole note be removed and the text "See Person County Solar Energy System Ordinance" be added to direct people where to find the pertinent information. To give a quick overview, in the spring of 2020, the Board of Commissioners enacted a 6-month moratorium on new solar energy systems in Person County. At the same time, the board instructed the Person County Planning Department staff to research and craft a freestanding solar energy system ordinance to better regulate solar energy systems in the county. Staff utilized a number of freestanding solar ordinances from multiple jurisdictions and also a template ordinance. We also included commentary from the Economic Development Commission, the Farm Bureau, and the Airport Committee to the extent feasible. Planning staff recommends approval of TA 0320. The proposed freestanding ordinance will address community concern and better regulate solar energy systems. Repealing the existing regulations ensures that solar energy systems are governed solely by the freestanding ordinance. At the August 13th Planning Board meeting, the board developed a number of different modifications. These are provided in your packet and they are color coded. I'm happy to go through specific questions if requested, otherwise we'll move ahead. Were there any items?
For Kayla?
What? Oh, yeah. Just on the planning board's modifications. Otherwise, we'll move ahead.
Hey, go right ahead.
Okay. All right, following that meeting, staff reviewed the planning board's modifications and found that those proposed modifications created a number of inconsistencies. So staff is recommending additional modifications just to ensure that the ordinance remains consistent. Those are also provided in your packets and they are color coded. And again, I'm happy to review specific sections if requested. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and move forward as well. So does the board have any questions about the modifications to the planning board changes from staff?
Okay, move along.
Okay. So at the August 13th, 2020 meeting of the planning board, the board voted unanimously 7-0 to recommend approval of the requested text amendment with the board's modifications to staff's text and with the reasonableness and consistency statement. There was additional commentary provided from the airport consultant after the planning board meeting, so we've included those comments in your packet for consideration. So at this time, I want to give a brief comparison between the old rules and the new proposed rules. So under the old rules, solar energy systems are only prohibited if they're in the residential zoning district. Solar energy systems are allowed in all other zoning districts without a public hearing if they are greater than 250 feet away from a residence, and that's measured wall to panel. So that's the only time that you'll get a public hearing with with a proposed solar energy system, the way the regulations are now. So with the new proposed rules, which would be under this freestanding ordinance, solar energy systems are divided into 3 levels. Or I guess if you could call them categories. And those are based on the acreage of the panels proposed, not the size of the property. So level 1 is less than half an acre of panels. Level 2 is between half an acre and 10 acres. And level 3 are greater than or equal to 10 acres. And again, that's of panels. So level 1, those are approved at staff level with no public hearing. So that's your typical zoning approval process, just as it would be for a single family dwelling. And that's in all districts. And again, level 1 solar energy systems are less than half an acre. Level 2 are approved at staff level, again, with no public hearings, only in B1, which is the highway business district, GI, which is general industrial, and rural conservation, RC. The proposed solar energy systems that are considered level 2 in the residential and neighborhood shopping districts, those require a special use permit. So special use permit is what Duke Energy had to go through tonight for the 2 landfill expansions. And I'll talk a little bit more very briefly about the SUP process at the end of this. So again, level 2 are solar energy systems between half an acre and 10 acres. So level 3 are prohibited in the residential zoning district and the B2 neighborhood shopping district. And they require a special use permit in the B1 highway commercial, GI general industrial, and RC rural conservation zoning districts. And again, level 3 are solar energy systems greater than or equal to 10 acres. So for any solar energy system that requires a special use permit, the special use permit process encourages community members to ask the Board of Commissioners for stricter requirements on a case-by-case basis. The special use permit process requires 2 public hearings, so Board of Commissioners and the Planning Board, mailed notification to landowners within 500 feet of the property, and signage of a development proposal placed on the site near the road for 2 months, at least 2 months. And they also require legal advertisements run in the local newspaper. And that's by state law. So that's what we do every time we have a special use permit request. And that would be the same for any solar energy system requiring a special use permit. So the major difference is between the old rules and the new proposed rules is when a solar energy system is approved at staff level versus when they require a special use permit. So the key takeaway is that the new proposed rules provide more opportunities for public comment than the old rules and more opportunities for decision makers to require additional conditions on a case-by-case basis. So the last slide is the board is required to make a motion on the reasonableness and consistency statement on the screen above. Does the board have any questions for staff?
So level 2 and 3 for a public hearing will come to us.
Yes.
And level 1, I assume, would just be someone just trying to put a panel on their home or do something with just themselves.
I believe that was the intent of the model which we used to craft this one, and that's also staff's intent.
I have a question on level 1. I know you're talking about maybe 1 panel, but you're talking a half acre could be based on the panel, so it could have a half acre of panels in someone's yard or somewhere like that. I guess my question is on decommissioning. Level 2 and level 3 are required to have a plan for decommissioning. And I just wonder what your thought is in level 1 not having to worry about decommissioning.
Well, level 1, and I don't know if Lori, you want to add anything to this, but level 1 is, the intent is more for, a small solar energy system like what was added on, was it to Pollywood, something like that. So yeah.
Right,
So
seeing on
something
houses that I'm
smaller.
thinking half acre, beside someone's house, how many panels we're talking about, say, on the ground. And yet we're saying, again, level 2, they have to worry about decommissioning, but we're not putting that emphasis on level 1. That's all I was wondering. why
Yeah,
we-
because level 1 is the intent is that it's minor. It's meant to be more accessory to kind of what's there.
It is truly accessory use, and the more level
Yeah.
we see are single family homeowners.
Yeah.
The last thing we want to do is require bonds from someone who's just wanting to put energy for their-
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I
Yeah.
understand that.
But the
I was just
level 2
questioning
and
about
level
that.
3, you could see them getting a lot bigger and potentially run into problems down the line that the bond and the decommissioning in the ordinance would protect the county from.
Thank you.
Sure.
I think Mr. Sims' question is good and valid. It's sort of like what we looked at with Duke Energy here. 50 years ago, we didn't have a clue that we'd be here talking about this tonight. So even if it's a homeowner and that homeowner decides in 20 years he wants to throw those panels out in his backyard, that's an adjoining property to someone else, it's still a concern of mine that we don't do something to make sure the decommissioning process is as thorough as it would be for anyone else.
Well, in that case, you would be talking about the junkyard ordinance, which is what that would fall under. So planning staff would be out there
Yeah,
anyways, getting that
We
cleaned up.
have complaints on that frequently. It's a
So,
very common complaint,
mhm.
even though I know it's personal property and some would say they can do what they want to with their own property, but something about these panels and decommissioning, we simply don't know. Unknowns are there. And so we need to do due diligence to make sure that, at least we try to cover that.
And staff has proposed that level 1 be exempted. The board could by all means remove that exemption so that decommissioning plans could be required for all 3 levels. Or it could be that you want to reduce the size of level 1 to something even smaller. Maybe level 1 becomes rooftop only. And then level 2 becomes anything from 0 to 10 acres on the ground. And I'm just thinking outside the box right now. I think it sounds like the ones on the ground are a little bit more concerned than the ones that people tend to put on their roofs. So an easy fix that I'm thinking of is level 1 becomes rooftop only. Level 2 becomes 0 to 9.999 on the ground, and then level 3. If you'd want to keep it, or option B is to do a decommissioning plan for all 3 levels.
Those are just my thoughts. I don't know what the feel of the board
Further
is.
comments from the board or staff? Questions?
What were the 2 areas that were strictly prohibited on level 3?
Residential and, which is the R zoning district, and B1, or I'm sorry, B2, which is neighborhood shopping.
Strictly prohibited, no special use.
Not in those 2 districts.
I have a question about, like solar panels out by the airport. If someone were to want to put a set of panels out there, is there any regulation that they would need to do, talk with the airport some way? Because again, I'm concerned about, you have those panels, sun hitting them, possibly creating a blind spot. Has there been consideration to that? And
Section 2.5 includes aviation notification.
5 nautical miles.
I'm sorry?
5 nautical miles, I think I read.
Yes, if you're within 5 nautical miles and you are a level 2 or level 3 solar energy system, you're required to comply with the language that's in here. So you're notifying all appropriate parties. And I'm not an expert in this, but having to ensure that the glare from your panels doesn't impact the airport. So there is language in here that addresses that. The only level that's exempt from that is a level 1. But all level 2 and level 3 that are within 5 nautical miles.
Mr. Chairman, is Mr. Bill Tugas here? Oh, yeah. Hey, Bill. We've talked a little about this, but are you comfortable with the way this reads as far as the airport and aviators? You okay with that? Okay. All right.
You were asking about the airport part? Is that what you were asking?
Yes.
Well, the FAA rules all but incorporated into this, so we should be okay with that, I would think.
Okay, any other questions for staff, comments?
I think I understood this, but I'm going to get it qualified. So what you're saying, if somebody comes in here with a 300-acre request for a permit, they've got to come to the Board of Commissioners to get a special use permit.
They've got to go to the planning board, Board of Commissioners. There are mailed notices twice to surrounding property owners, signage, legal ads, yes.
Okay, then the commissioners, I guess the planning board as well, if they saw fit and looked at it and thought it didn't fit into that area correctly, then they could cut it from 300 to 150. They could modify that permit request. Could they modify that permit? Could they modify that request?
You could, the only thing is when you place a condition on the special use permit, the applicant has to agree to that condition. However, if they are wanting to proceed with solar panels, then in that case, I'd imagine they would agree to 150 versus 300. But any condition placed on a quasi judicial special use permit has to be agreed on by the applicant. But that is a potential outcome. Or it could be that it doesn't meet the finding of fact that it's in harmony with the surrounding area and it could be denied.
And if we denied, what would be their appeal process? Do they have one?
Our special use permit process,
Would our say be final?
usually you have to, and I'll double check right now, usually you have to wait 1 year unless you've made significant changes to the application, but I'll double check that in my ordinance, just because we haven't had any.
No judge or anybody will overturn what we said?
No, that would be I'm trying to think, that would be Board of Adjustment cases, would go to a court. Yes. No. No appeal may be taken to the Board of Adjustment from the action of the commissioners.
Granting or denying a special use permit, any such action by county commissioners shall be considered as the equivalent of action on proposed zoning amendment and shall be reviewable only.
But I'm not sure about court. Is Ron?
You go to Superior Court.
Yes, okay.
But it would be the final action by the county, there would be.
Right.
As I understand it, I don't know.
I have another question on the level 2 and level 3. Any idea in this county how many level 2s and how many level 3s we have?
I have that answered for you.
All righty.
There's a lot of people. Right now, we have 1, 2, 3, 6 solar energy systems that would be considered a level 3. And then 3 that would be considered a level 2. In total, we only have 10 solar energy systems in Person County of a commercial and industrial nature. And all of the largest level 3 that we have, and this is based off of panel acreage, is 37 acres of panels. That's the largest solar energy system that we have in the county to date. And that
Speaking of parcel acres and panels. For example, one of them is 479 acres. But it's 235
panels.
Okay. Further questions from the board? Okay, we'll move on to our.
Let me ask one. Did you finally decide the appeals process was if we asked them to modify the permit and they didn't want to do it? What is their appeal procedure? Can they go to the court system or they
Superior
gotta
Court.
go?
We'd have to confirm, but
Let's ask Ron. He's on the
Yeah.
phone. No offense, attorney, but we can hold this one accountable.
Ron, did you hear the question?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
I think this is a legislative determination, and there's no provision for. Okay, there is no provision to appeal your denial. You have the discretion to agree or not to agree, to permit or not to permit.
Ron, we're talking about the special use permit process, which is quasi judicial, not legislative. We're not talking about the text amendment. We're talking about if it were approved and came to the board as a special use permit under quasi judicial governing.
We're not talking about the text amendment. We're talking about if it
He's listening to it, the stream, and responding by phone.
Does Lori want to ask a question directly into the phone?
Ask him directly, brother, in the phone.
Excuse me?
Ask him directly in the phone.
Ron, can you cut down your streaming and talk to Lori just on the phone, please?
I'm sorry, what's the question again? Is it the original question from the Commissioner Slayton, whether or not if you turn down the special use permit, whether there is an appeal from that denial? Was that the question?
That is the question, Ron, and the special use permit is a quasi judicial permit.
But I'm not at all sure that there is authority to appeal directly to court on the denial of a permit. Anything coming from the Board of Adjustment does go directly to the Superior Court, but I do not believe an action, even in the nature of a special use permit, is appealable to the judicial authorities. Now, of course, there could be some irregularity that someone is appealing, that incompetent testimony was allowed, et cetera, in which case you could appeal that, but just I don't like the decision, therefore I will appeal to the judicial branch. Do not believe that would be possible under the circumstance. In essence, final decision is decision of Board of County Commissioners.
Thank you, Ron. Further questions from the board? They're not going anywhere, but we want to get to our people that's signed up to speak.
Thank you.
All right, now we will have public comments. We had no one to sign up in favor of the solar energy system ordinance as presented, but in opposition to, we have 4 people. Mr. Paul Lynch of 395 Union Grove Church Road, Hurdle Mills, if you'll come forward. I haven't muted. Ron,
Turn your
will you
volume
please
down.
mute your side?
Chairman, thank you, sir. Commissioners. As you said, I live at 395 Union Grove Church Road. By way of disclosure, let me just start by saying that I have professional experience with solar thermal projects, with the design, installation, and operation of equipment commonly used in those plants. I have no experience whatever with photovoltaics. Let me start off by saying that I am not against green energy. I'm not against solar energy. It certainly has its place in the energy supply mix for our society. However, there is more hype, hoopla, misinformation, and lies being bandied about that nice, clean, safe, green energy that we call solar. We need to be careful because there are many serious environmental concerns, economic concerns that will impact our community, especially when you're talking about utility scale projects, level 3, level 2, okay? We need to be very careful about that. There are a number of issues that need to be addressed in the ordinance that's under consideration. I just don't have time to go into them in any detail here. But there are issues regarding site maintenance, on-site energy storage, security, and so forth. There's a whole list of things that need to be considered that can be adopted into a land use ordinance. And let me also say that if I may, sir, I'd like to be able to put these concerns into a letter to the board, to the planning officials, whatever, that it can be considered. And may I assume that there would be another public hearing on this ordinance before it's adopted, at least 1 or 2 more?
If it's not adopted today, if we bring it back, then there will have to be a public hearing. Is that correct?
Okay. So if the ordinance is adopted today as presented, you're saying?
It could be adopted today as presented. If it's not, if we bring it back, then there will be a public hearing.
Okay, I would respectfully request that the board not adopt it today. I'm in favor of the 2-month delay, a moratorium, I guess you'd want to call it. There are some changes that seriously need to be considered, and I would ask the board delay their consideration of the ordinance for another 2 months, if you would. That's it, sir. I'll yield to the next speaker.
Thank you.
Mr. Ray Fishy of 8930 Hurdle Mills Road, Hurdle Mills.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, commissioners, and thank you for allowing me to speak. And of course, my name is Ray Fishy, and I'm not against the solar farms or their concept, but I do think we need to adopt more significant guidelines needed to be established, especially in regard to the larger farms, and help them blend into the community. In the rural setting of Hurdle Mills, we're used to woodland and farmland, not larger solar farms. You can imagine how a really large farm would disrupt the community. And I respect what the landowners want to do with their property, but in some cases, 1, 2, or even 3 landowners can do something that'll negatively affect the entire community. And little did I know I was going to be in a real experience. Most of the time we hear these ordinances and we say, well, it'll never happen to us. But in this particular case, last year, there was an 800-acre solar farm proposed for the Hurdle Mills area. That solar farm went 1.8 linear miles down Hurdle Mills Road. Sometimes it was on both sides of Hurdle Mills Road. My son bought some property 10 years ago at 8019 Hurdle Mills Road, which turned out to be right in the middle of this 800 acres. I'm sure little did he know that when he built that house and 2 grandchildren later, that he could be surrounded by a solar farm. If that 800-acre proposal had gone through, he would have had solar panels on 4 sides, or could have had solar panels on 4 sides of his house, of his property. And the closest ones by the ordinance could have been within 100 feet of his house. So that's certainly something that I'm sure he wasn't planning on. Since that time, the solar company that proposed those rescinded, at least for now, 2 of the proposals, or 2 of the 3 properties included in that 800 acres. Yet that still leaves 376 acres in the current proposal that's still on the books. And that could still put solar panels on 3 sides of his house and still within 100 foot of his house. So my concern is not with prohibiting solar farms, but putting some guidelines there that will help them blend into the community to coexist, especially when you're talking about these large farms. You know, we know it's the thing of the future, but again, you know, who wants to live right beside one or have them surrounding your house? And the current ordinance that you're looking at today certainly puts that back in your hands, each and every individual case, but do you want to have to deal with every individual case every time it comes up, or possibly modify the ordinance where it will take care of some of those up front? There's 3 things I would like you to consider that are different than what the ordinance says now. One is areas that are currently zoned residential. And you got to think they're zoned residential for a purpose. And a large part of this 800-acre farm was residential land that you would have had to rezone before it could be considered anyway. So what I'm asking is that areas that are currently zoned residential that may be rezoned for a solar farm, restrict the size of that solar farm to 50 acres or less on any parcel of property. The second thing would be for all solar farms that are greater than 10 acres, increase the vegetative buffer from 50 feet to 100 feet. Make it more blendable to the community. And for all solar farms greater than 10 acres, make the minimum distance between the solar panels and any residential structure at least 300 feet. Put some distance between the existing houses and those solar farms if they are going to coexist. So again, not against the solar farms at all, but just would hope that you guys would listen to some considerations as far as blending them into the existing communities. Any questions?
Thank you.
Mr. Anthony Horton, 7233 Hurl Mills Road, Hurl Mills.
Thank you, Ray. Good evening, Commissioners. I appreciate y'all's time and listening this evening. Obviously, you show concern for the community and for the county of Person in the solar energy sector. Basically, I agree a lot with what Ray said. I think there should be size limits, especially in the residential area of, do y'all mind if I pull this down? Just a second back on me. Okay. I would like to see size limits in the residential area if the residential area has to be rezoned. And we know that it has to be rezoned to have the special use permit. So I would like to see that as well, what Ray mentioned about 50 acres. Also, I would like to see a larger buffer between the adjoining properties of at least a minimum of 150 feet. If I'm not mistaken, what I heard earlier tonight, there's a 150-foot buffer between landfills and other properties. Is that correct? Is that correct? That's okay. In my consideration, a solar energy system is also considered a landfill because it does harbor toxic chemicals. We cannot deny that. You can do your research. Okay. There's lead and cadmium and other toxic chemicals in these solar systems. And the reason why I say that there should be a larger buffer is because if these were to leach into the land, at least the adjoining properties would have a little more buffer. So maybe they would not leach into other properties, barring streams and creeks. Okay, I don't have any research to know how far these things will, but I have looked up on the internet of pictures of where tornadoes and natural disasters have destroyed these solar farms and have spread this material all over other adjoining properties. Question is, who is responsible for that cleanup? who is responsible for compensating the landowners whose land will be deemed totally inoperable after this. So I would like to at least see 150-foot buffer in the ordinance, and I would, and also I would like to see at least a 500-foot buffer from the residential houses there again to protect possibly their water sources from leaching. Hailstorms could cause these things to leach. I mean, we know it's toxic. So that is an issue. And as Gordon spoke about the level ones about, decommission as well, obviously you want them decommissioned properly because of the contents that are in them. Okay, so that's something I'd like to see because it does stem from the 376 acre farm that was proposed and is still in the North Carolina Utilities Commission. They have continued to file their certificate to keep that open. So to place and let me just give you some logistics. 80 megawatt facility would consist of approximately 400,000 solar cells. Okay. For that to be put in a residential, even on rural conservation, if you go back to the to your special use permit finding of facts, that would not be in harmony with the area of a residential or rural conservation, because rural conservation is still supposed to be limited manufacturing or construction on that as well. So I would definitely like to see some kind of regulations on the size of these in the residential and rural conservation areas. I just think it's important that be in the ordinance, and I would like to see y'all at least delay a vote on the ordinance until these things are considered, just for protection, because I live at 7233 Hurdle Mills Road. This will affect my property as well as far as adjoining. I have 3 children that would maybe like to build on the land behind my house someday. But if this is built to the tune of 376 acres, 400 some thousand panels, then that's going to deter them of their dream of possibly living back there someday. And God forbid a natural disaster causes it to spread these panels all over our property and adjoining properties, including my father's property, Ray Fashee's son property, Mike Laws, Brenda Clayton. We don't know how far these things can be distributed, but if we limit the size and the scope of these solar energy systems, then that could at least give some kind of protection for the surrounding areas. So I want everything to be in harmony and in concordance with rural residential areas and rural conservation areas. So thank you for your time.
PJ Gentry of 541 Bird Creek, Hurdle Mills. Sorry. That's okay.
Again, thank you, gentlemen and staff, for being here. And I'm really impressed with the work you guys have done trying to put something new together. That's a great start. I can't add much more to the data that Mr. Horton and Mr. Fushi have already said. I could repeat it all again, but it's the same thing. But the bottom line is you're putting an industrial facility in a residential area. Now, you wouldn't put the landfill, you wouldn't let Duke put a landfill for coal ash in a residential agricultural community. So why would we do this with these solar panels? They're toxic. They're huge. Imagine you get up one day, you walk out your front door, you live in the country, Ray, you've got a beautiful landscape. Imagine walking out tomorrow morning and seeing nothing but glass and glare, because that's what you're going to see. Now, we've been doing solar since 1973. They've been working on it. It's getting better and better and better, but it's not there. And I think to subject the community of Hurdle Mills to the test to see how much more we can get out of this technology at this time is a disservice to the citizens. It's a rural residential community. You're talking about an industrial process here. It needs to be in an industrial park or in land that already zoned for commercial industrial use like this. Thank you so much for your consideration.
That concludes the speakers for this public hearing.
I didn't get to sign up, but I'd love to be on the list. That's all right. You are in favor of? Sort of on the fence. I think it'd be all right if I was in the opposed list, actually.
Okay, state your name and.
State your name and address, please.
Sure. My name is Rex Young. My address is 606 Wade Avenue, Raleigh, North Carolina. Sorry, new office, 27605.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, I appreciate you adding me to the list, giving me the opportunity to address the board. I submitted some comments to you by email late last week, so you may have already received those, and this is largely, I just sort of wanted to appear before you and repeat some of those comments. I want to thank the planning staff, Lori and Caleb, all the work that you've done on this ordinance and the planning board for advancing it to this stage. I know a lot of work has gone into that, and I know this is a complicated issue where there are a lot of different folks involved here. There's a lot of landowners in Person County who certainly want to have solar on their property. There are more companies like ours at Oakhurst Energy that would like to continue investing in the county. And there's certainly opinions of other folks who are going to live near these projects. And that's a lot for any board to have to reconcile all those different interests. So we appreciate everyone's work on trying to put this together. I think a lot of concern over solar does arise from the increasing size of these projects, which largely is a consequence of changes in state law over the last few years. When solar first sort of took off in North Carolina in the early, at the beginning of this last decade, there were a lot more incentives for these smaller projects. I think you mentioned this average size was around 37, or the biggest one was 37 acres. That doesn't surprise me because the incentives at the time largely favored projects no bigger than 50 acres. And that all changed in 2017. You are seeing these several hundred acre sites just to sort of remain competitive under the new laws. So I think it obviously makes sense that you'd want to update your ordinance to take into account changes in the industry and keep up with these larger projects that you're seeing. Particularly, I know folks have a lot of concern about the one at Hurdle Mills, and I'm happy to. My company, Oakhurst Energy, is familiar with that project, and I'm happy to answer questions, about that at any time. I do think this ordinance does a good job of taking a lot of these different concerns into account. I think there's several ways that you could streamline this ordinance a little bit so that it doesn't add unnecessary duplication or maybe bring in unnecessary consultants to sort of add additional layers to a process that I think could be a little more straightforward for everyone, both the developers and just the administration of the special use permit process. I do want to clarify that most of my comments are aimed at these larger projects. I know there's a level 1, level 2, level 3 distinction here, but there is this trend towards bigger projects, and so that's sort of where I'm aiming my comments. There is a lot of interest in making sure these projects are screened properly and have adequate vegetation around them. The ordinance as proposed to you, I think makes a lot of sense in that for the screening that is required, there would be, and that's important to point out, there would be vegetation required around 50 feet of vegetation required around all of these projects, around the perimeter of them, between an adjoining landowner and the nearest panel. There would be 50 feet of vegetation. That is certainly a lot more than other counties I'm working in. And I have a project somewhere else that only requires 6 feet. I think that is certainly far too lenient. We're volunteering to go far beyond that just because that's just not enough. 50 feet is one of the more strict requirements, and sometimes strict is necessary. I think that's an adequate amount to shield panels from view. 50 feet of vegetation is difficult to see through. So the ordinance in this case wisely, pop that off, excuse me, allows the developer to either plant 50 feet of vegetation or preserve 50 feet of vegetation. It doesn't make sense to chop down trees if you're simply going to plant some more right behind it. One way I think you could make this a little more efficient, though, is by eliminating the requirement that you only can preserve trees by bringing in an arborist or a landscape architect or landscape designer to sign off on that plan. I haven't seen that in other counties where you're allowed to preserve vegetation, and I think there are easier ways to tell if that vegetation will be sufficient. The easiest answer there is that ultimately the developer will have to get a certificate of occupancy, and either the building inspector or maybe you call it code enforcement officer will come and do an inspection, and if that requirement isn't met, that certificate won't be granted. So I think there's easier ways to implement that without just bringing in another consultant with another fee, with adding additional weeks of time to the permitting process. That's obviously not some major requirement, but it just adds additional time and money. The second concern that I have has to do with the simply duplicating regulations that are already under the purview of the FAA. Again, the requirements that you have here are not going to make or break solar projects, but they are going to add duplication and extend the development timeline. The FAA has regulations where any proposed construction is required to go in and give notice of proposed construction. This is not just solar panels. This is any construction project. So on the one hand, I'm not sure that it's necessarily should make sense to target solar. You could have a building with a lot of reflective glass on it that could equally be considered, create glare. All construction should go through this notice of proposed construction process. And the FAA has an online tool where you go through this and you submit an application, and they tell you if there is a problem, whether you need to modify your proposed project. Again, not just solar. There are certain applications and questions specific to the type of project that you have. So I think for section 2.5, where the ordinance addresses the airspace and the FAA requirements, I would consider either taking this section out entirely because it duplicates the job of the FAA, or I would expand that requirement to all types of construction to make sure that all types of construction are following these FAA rules.
Mr. Young, if you could kind of wrap it up, some of these things you've already sent us, I think, in email.
Sure. Okay. Last one, I'll wrap up on this one. This is mostly because this is the most important one, and a lot of information has been said about the toxicity of the panels. The decommissioning is, I think, the question we get asked the most about, maybe second only to the view and the screening. I certainly understand why, when this project, we're here to get a permit now, and this project is going to be sitting there for 40 years, and then you want to know who's going to clean it up and how, and that's certainly understandable. From the meeting tonight, I gather you've been told some things about an energy site being totally okay from energy developers, and then later needed to make some changes to the disposal of that energy generation. So I can understand why you'd want to ask these questions. As written right now for a level 3 project, the type that I think you're going to see the most of, you mostly enforce decommissioning through a bond, and that's something that typically you might require for a 6-month to a year-long construction project. This is a 40-year project, and there are a few firms that are going to be willing to. I won't say there aren't any out there, but there are going to be fewer that are going to be willing to manage or escrow a fund for 40 years. It just becomes an administrative hassle for both the developer, the firm you're dealing with, and also for the county to enforce. There are several ways that the decommissioning is already dealt with. First of all, the ground lease agreement that we have with landowners requires us to restore the site. The Environmental Management Commission right now is drafting rules for how to dispose of these panels. And right now there's an EPA test about the toxicity that effectively the panels are ground up and given an acid bath and then tested to see if anything would leach out into the soil or the ground, and solar panels pass that test. You can put these panels in a landfill if you absolutely needed to. A lot of people get sort of caught up on lead or cadmium telluride. The way I like to explain the cadmium telluride is you think about table salt. If you had sodium on its own or chloride on its own, it would not be a good idea to consume either one of those substances alone, but together you've got table salt, and that's completely harmless. We eat that every day. Same thing with cadmium telluride. It's completely encased and not water soluble. It does not leach into the soil. In a solar panel, there's less lead than there is in a shotgun shell. So a lot of those concerns, I simply think it's hard to sort of get the truth on the internet. I think we all know sometimes there's a lot of information on there. So those are my, I'm trying to be brief here, but that is a lot of material to cover. So I think with my last comments, I would urge that the bond requirement of section 2.6 be removed. I think there's a lot of other strong rules you have there about decommissioning, and you have ways to enforce them through fees and penalties. And I appreciate your consideration of both my comments in the letter and letting me repeat those tonight. So thanks again for all your work on this and planning staff and planning board.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions, comments from the board before we close out the public hearing? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to come out of public hearing?
So moved.
Been properly moved, further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries. Okay, consideration. I think given that this is the first time we've had this presented to us publicly, and then we've also had public comment tonight, that we need to take time to digest that and to get some of our questions. I think several of us had some questions earlier. I think Ron's going to check on some things for us as well. And I would like to table this till our first meeting in October, which I believe is October 5th at 7 p.m. And I'll make that motion unless someone else has any comments beforehand. All right, make a motion to table. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye. All opposed, motion carries. Okay. Public hearing for extension of solar energy systems development approval moratorium ordinance for a period of 2 months. Do I hear a motion to open the public hearing? It's been properly moved. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. All right, Lori. Not gonna pass it to Kayla?
No, look at me. I'll take this one. You have a memo in your packet that was drafted by the attorney, which basically would extend this moratorium for 60 days. The extension is due to both COVID-19 and the cyber incident. We had hoped to have this to you earlier, but due to unforeseen circumstances, we are presenting it to you at the September meeting. So the attorney drafted a 60-day extension for the moratorium, and it is in your packet. If you have any questions?
Okay, question. Since we're tabling it till October 5th, which is 27 days, should it coincide with that, or can we just keep the 60-day, and then if we do something on the 27th, it goes away?
I'm gonna guess it would be best to keep it as the 60 days because it was advertised as the 60 days.
Okay.
But yes, it would go away at that point if it was decided.
On the
if
5th.
The item was voted on the 5th.
Okay, everybody understand that? Questions? Anyone signed up to speak?
Yes, in favor of the public hearing for an extension of the existing moratorium, Mr. Paul Lynch.
Mr. Chairman, just to say no to my prior request to delay this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lynch. Further comments, questions from the board?
And we actually have one
Oh, sorry.
other, PJ Gentry.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, Ms. Gentry. Is that all, clerk? Okay, thank you, Ms. Lynch. Okay, do I hear a motion to come out of public hearing? Been properly moved, further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye, motion carries. Okay, consideration. Make a motion to extend the moratorium 60 days. Further discussion from the board? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Informal comments.
There were no one to sign up.
Okay, discussion and approval of the consent agenda. Move for approval. All right, it's been motioned for approval. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. All opposed, motion carries. New business, item number 10, request for county assistance for residential well issues at 24 Victoria Lane, Roxborough. Manager York.
Good evening, Commissioners. This item was brought back from your August 3rd meeting. Ms. Anita Banks addressed the board about her very low flow well. Do you want me to wait till? Can you hear me okay? Okay. Ms. Banks had addressed the board at your August 3rd meeting about a very low flowing well at her personal residence on Victoria Lane, and commissioners had asked that this item be brought back for more discussion. Specifically, she was requesting some consideration of an extension of city water and a city water line. So while the county does not provide water, we do have a long-standing agreement with the city to partner on extending water lines where it's financially
Turn your
feasible.
volume down.
And just turn the volume. So the city was not able to come to this meeting, but they did include some information that we wanted to share with you, and we had this available at the last meeting as well. They gave us a tentative cost estimate for running a water line, but strongly expressed the fact that they do not extend water lines to a single residence. The cost that they had estimated for this water line with a private contractor, I think ran about $110,000. And there's more detail on the back of that agenda item from the city. There's also, as I mentioned, an agreement between the city and the county for extension of water lines. And there's a very detailed process that an applicant would go through, taking an application to the city manager. City council has to approve such water line extension, and then it's brought back to the county commissioners for a vote. So it does have to be approved by both boards if that is something that you all would like to explore further.
Okay. Ms. Banks, would you like to address the board?
You can come on up.
Come to the mic.
Yeah,
if you
come
don't
on up
mind.
so we can hear you.
I think that Heidi covered it very well. I don't know if I will brief on the process that we just told her to describe, so I'm willing to go through that if that's what it takes. But I think that we are living in an environment where we need assistance. I have my fellow neighbors here with me tonight, and they are experiencing the same issues that I am experiencing, and they just built their home less than a year ago. We are in an environment where based upon the size of our lot, we do not have the availability to do a lot more drilling. I also know that I've spoken to some of my other neighbors that are in Landmark North and Landmark South, and they have experienced the same issues. Out of 17 homes that are in that area, 10 of those homes have wells below, that are producing water below 2 gallons per minute. And I just think that in the environment that we're living in today, where people are being advised to live at home, stay more at home, that we need to be able to operate in our homes. We need to be able to have water. And I just don't think that it's something that I can solve on my own. I need the help of the city and county government to help me. And I don't know if Melissa and Al would like to share that they have experience or not.
Yes, ma'am, please.
My name is Melissa Salisbury. I live at 68 Victoria Lane, next door. And we're who she referenced. We moved in March, at the end of March. And we drilled the well to 690 feet, didn't get any water, drilled it down to 1,240 feet, and then had it fracked. So after all that and almost $26,000, We are now getting about a gallon an hour. So it takes 4 days of water to produce for me to wash 2 loads of laundry. We only have just over an acre, so as Anita said, there's no other place for us to drill a well. So again, as she said, we do. Right, and we work with Harold, who's the county.
Yeah, we have Harold Kelly here.
And, you know, try to figure out what we can do, but our options are really limited.
And what was down so low, we have to go to the city and take water pretty fast. We have to practice it as well.
I think it's very disturbing if I may add that we live probably 50 yards from a home that has a swimming pool. And so we are struggling to live day by day, not knowing whether our water is going to go out, and you look across your yard and there's someone with a swimming pool. And we bought our lots in good faith to be able to invest in Person County, and I just feel like this is not a solution that we can walk away from and say, you have to handle this on your own. I personally believe that there is no water there. I talked to my neighbors across the street this weekend, and they are dealing with high levels of iron in their water. And I just think that we are embarking on something 5 to 10 years, which is the theme that I've heard throughout this meeting tonight, that we're embarking on a series where 5 to 10 years from now, we may have some major issues with not being able to have a decent water or water that is healthy for us to be able to have as well. So we need help.
Any questions from the board for any landowners?
Did you say 17 homes?
Yeah, so it's 17 homes on this document that I have.
Okay.
15 out of the 7 have low producing wells, in my opinion, below 2 gallons per minute. And in addition to that, those homes have been tracked. I know my lot was tracked twice. I paid $80,000 to have my well tracked twice. And then additional homes here have been tracked. Your well has been tracked. I think my other neighbor's well has been tracked. And the well depth is like 805, 640, 1200. I mean, it's a lot, for lack of a better way to say it.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Clayton?
When we get through talking with these folks, we got some representatives of the health department here. I want to see what their assessment of this is.
Okay.
It may be that there's something needs to be done for the whole neighborhood instead of just
Well,
one person. And if
was
you're gonna
kind
look
of
at it
my
like that,
point.
then you've got the city involved. They'll look at water for a group of people, but you're hard pressed to get the city to agree to try to run it for one person. And that's not saying anything against you. It's just amount of economics for one thing. And the other thing is you have problems with the water going stale in the line if it's not being used. If you run a water line and it's low usage, you know, it needs to move in that pipe because that water's being treated at the water plant and chlorinated, and it can't stand stagnant for so long. So if you've got a group of people out there, it seems like to me that they've got a better chance of getting something done, because we've got to work back through the city with this. This is not just a county issue. And I think maybe we need to hear from
Harold, if you'd like to add anything.
I think they described the situation. I think they did a good job describing the situation. There's at least 3 homes that have just barely enough water to live off of. And probably another half dozen that have less than 2 gallons a minute based on the well water. Just a tough situation, just the geology. Just not enough water in that area.
Okay.
Okay. Now, is that a planned subdivision?
It is.
And approximately how many lots?
Well, one is off Victoria Lane, I think, I don't know the total, how many lots? Well, on our road, control of your road within maybe 10 or so of landmark north and south.
So it's pretty safe to say that will probably not happen with the existing conditions. Who would build a house there with, and knowing there are such water issues on those?
Yeah. I think there are some lots. Over there.
All right, from the county end of what we can do. Okay, we need to establish a water and sewer construction fund, which does not exist now, correct? Or do we have one?
We do have one.
But is there any funds in there?
You know, I'm not sure.
Okay,
I have to check on that.
last year, budget time, we funded close to $1 million or $1 million
That's right.
into a water
Extension project,
extension project line.
yes.
Could, if there's no funding in the water sewer construction fund, could we take money from that for this fund?
It would require action by the board, but yes, you could do that.
Okay, all right. So outline again what the residents need to do as per application to us and the city. Thank you, Harold.
Yes, the summary that I included of the city-county joint water and sewer agreement says that an application is made to the city manager. The city manager is to make a recommendation to the city council and to the board of commissioners. Then the city approves all the engineering, contract plans, et cetera. County and city each approve all plans, authorize each extension. No commitment can be made unless both boards by resolution approve the extension.
Okay, so that would be the first step. And so we will recommend probably that you do that step. And then from our end, you will check on our water and sewer construction fund, what's in there, and how we go about transferring funds from the other water fund if we need to.
Yes.
Okay.
A budget amendment can take care of
Is that okay with the board? Is that clear to the residents? Okay, and thank you all for coming tonight. All right. Chairman's report. I've been in contact with a few of you all. I've got to call the rest of you. I attended a meeting for the Woodsdale Fire Department with the president and vice chair, or the vice president of their new board, and would like to add to our October 5th agenda some budget requests that they have. Currently, the way we're funding their efforts to recertify is that they are bringing an invoice to us, and then we pay that invoice. And I think due to COVID and some other unforeseen circumstances, it has they've been paying those invoices late and incurring fees due to that. I asked them to give us a somewhat of a budget that it will take for them for this year as they go through recertifying for that area. And that was brought to the office today, and I will give a copy to Brenda to share with all of you. And per our adopted budget that we got today, we have somewhere around 99,000 that was unspent from the fire tax in that fund. And so I'll be bringing that forth on the 5th to see if we want to go about funding them possibly monthly instead of this invoice and we pay. And but it will need some type of memorandum of understanding between us and that board to where any funds not spent will revert back to the county. And maybe the staff could be working on something like that between now and the 5th.
Sure.
And then, like I said, the ones I haven't talked to you and Kyle, and I'll get with you all on their request.
So of the 99,000, I think we had appropriated some for the bonuses.
That's already in there.
Already
I stopped by Amy's today, and after, it was 123,000, after we
I
gave the
gotcha.
additional funds to
Gotcha.
Timberlake and some more for lowering their ISO rating,
Okay.
it's roughly 99,000
Okay.
left in the district tax.
All right.
And so I'll be bringing that towards you at the next month meeting.
Okay.
Okay, that's all I have. Manager's report.
Commissioners, I wanted to take the opportunity to introduce our new Assistant County Manager. She's in attendance at our meeting, Miss Catherine Kathy. Her first day was the 24th, and we are reorganizing to allow her to help partner on some of the supervision of our departments. And we are looking at her doing some of our public safety, some of our cultural, and some of our development services. So you'll get to know Catherine as she continues to work with us, but wanted to make sure you had a chance to say hello to her tonight. Thank you.
Welcome. That's all you have, Manager?
Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Sims?
Just want to thank everyone for staying. It's been a long meeting. Appreciate everyone who stuck it out and been here for the whole meeting. And appreciate all the county commissioners, everything we've done tonight, working together on these issues. So thank you.
Commissioner Clay?
Do the census. If you hadn't done the census, it means a lot of money to these counties, the way they count this census. So we could lose money if people don't, and this virus certainly interfered with it. And another question I've got is, do we need to look at any type of moratorium on the development out there in that subdivision those people live on until they get this water problem resolved? And, you know, Harold might be better to answer that, but that developer, that property owner out there that owns that development needs to be working with somebody about getting water. And if he's having this kind of well problems out there, you don't need to keep adding to this problem by adding new houses out there and drilling dry wells. Now, something needs to be looked at on this, and you can get geologists in here to look at these things, even from the state. The Department of Environment and Natural Resources used to would send somebody up here to kind of look to see if they could see what the situation is. And, you know, different types of rock have different water and at different depths. So you know, this is bigger. This is a bigger problem than that latest problem. From what I'm seeing tonight, it seems to be more and more. Well, they don't need to keep adding to that problem until we resolve the water issue. And so I think it'd be incumbent on us to ask the health department to see if they think those ought to be some type of moratorium on that until this water situation is resolved out there. Because you may have 2 more people next month coming in here that just, and new houses with this problem is a real issue. It's a real issue anyway, but it's a real issue with that. I mean, I've dealt with water. You can do pretty well with everything else, but you've got to have water.
Thank you. Mr. Per year.
Ditto.
Vice Chairman Powell.
I couldn't say more.
You can say ditto too then. All right. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye. You gotta wait.